Hello, this is Instructor Williams. I am the technology instructor at the Antioch Public Library District. Today, we will be going through Excel 2016 Formulas and Functions, Part 2. Our objectives for today's lesson are relative cell reference, creating complex formulas, the order of operations, and absolute cell reference. Relative cell reference. Relative cell reference is a function that auto-updates a formula as we advance through rows or columns containing similar data. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a file here that has examples for relative cell data. There we go. And we're looking at an invoice for Mangiabello Artisan Pasta. So this function is going to allow us to enter the formula once and then advance through the data without having to manually type the formula multiple times. So let's look at how this works. So the first thing we need to do is come into D5 and activate that cell by clicking on it, because that's going to be our line total for the black bean flavored fettuccine. We're going to be multiplying the quantity of 5 by the unit price, which is $12, right here in the line total. As with all formulas in Excel, we have to start out with an equal sign because that tells Excel, hey, we're doing a formula. So I'm going to put the equals in there. Then we need to put in the cell references. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is to come over to the quantity in A5, which is 5 packages, and type that cell reference into my formula, A5. Then I'm going to insert the asterisk for multiplication, and then reference C5 for the unit price. And when I hit enter, I will get the line total for 5 packages of fettuccine black bean flavor. Just like that. And now we can see that the line total for the black bean flavored fettuccine is $60. Now so far this is just like the cell reference that we looked at in the previous lesson, where I type in the cell references instead of the actual numbers. But now there's a new thing that we can do where we don't have to type in that formula over and over and over. If I come to the bottom right corner of this cell, you can see that my cursor turns to a black cross. I can click on my left mouse and drag down, and it does the math automatically for me. So instead of typing in the formula over and over and over and over, I just drag that down and it automatically advances from A5 times C5 to A6 times C6, then to A7 times C7, then A8 times C8, so on and so forth, and it gives me the line total for all of my items just by dragging the bottom corner of the active cell down. Creating complex formulas. So in this part of our lesson, we're going to briefly review our high school math on how to solve a complex formula in the proper order. I'm going to look up the acronym online. There we go, and it's PEMDAS. And the sentence that goes with that is, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." And it means that we start with the parentheses, then we work on exponents, then multiplication, then division, then addition, then subtraction. So now we're going to take a little time to go over a sample of a complex formula before we move on to the other points in this lesson, because this is important information to know going forward. So I'm going to open up a new Microsoft Excel workbook. I'm just going to use a blank workbook. And we're going to use column A to enter our information. So the complex formula that we're going to put in today is this. I'm going to put in 40 divided by parenthesis 10 minus 8 close parenthesis multiplied by 4 to the exponent of 2. Now when I hit enter, you'll notice that the problem did not solve itself. And the reason being is that I did not put an equal sign at the beginning. So without the equal sign, Excel does not know this is a math problem. And that's what I want to do for this, because now we're going to take this problem and we're going to break it down step by step based on the PEMDAS technique. Remember, PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. P for parenthesis, E for exponent, M for multiplication, D for division, A for addition, S for subtraction. One thing to note, for multiplication and division, it's whichever one comes first. But it helps us to remember it if we just remember a sequence with a sentence, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the first thing we're going to need to solve is the parenthesis. So if we look at the formula bar, the parenthesis, everything inside the parenthesis is 10 minus 8. Well, if I come over here and I do the math, you do equal 10 minus 8. It gives me the number 2. So I'm going to rewrite the formula with the parenthesis being solved. So now I have 40 divided by 2 times 4 to the exponent of 2. So I took care of the parenthesis part. The next part is the E, the exponent, which is right here at the very end. 4 to the exponent of 2. So if I come over here in this line, I can do that math problem. I'm going to go equal 4 to the exponent. To get that little caret, it's shift 6. And then 2. If I hit enter, it does the math. Exponent of 2 means 4 multiplied by itself, so 4 times 4 gives me 16. Now I'm going to write out the problem filling that in. So we have 40 divided by 2 times 16. Then we get to the M for multiplication, or D for division. And like I said earlier, that's whichever one comes first in the problem. Well, here, the division comes first. So the problem then is 40 divided by 2. And that gives me 20. So then I end up with 20 times 16. And then division, multiplication. Okay, so now we're multiplying. So if I do the formula down here now, if I do 20 times 16, my total is 320. So we remember PEMDAS because that helps us remember the sequence of how to do a complex math problem. Now if I were to put an equal sign in front of the original problem, it says to Excel, hey, this is a math problem. Can you do the math problem? If I hit enter, it does the math. It factors everything in for me. And you can see the answer is 320. Just like when I broke it down step by step. So that's a complex formula. And we're going to use some of that concept in the next section. Order of operations. Now in the order of operations, what we want to do is learn how to factor in the tax, because you can't go anywhere in America and buy anything without paying a tax. So what we're going to do is factor in the tax so that we can learn how to use a complex formula in a real life scenario using this invoice. So the first thing we want to do is click on the cell where we want the formula to appear. And so for this particular instance, we're looking at F6. And so we're going to tell it it's a math problem by pressing equal. And then we're going to use the open parenthesis. And then we want to click on the cell that contains the first value of the formula. This is the first value of our formula. the total for the tomato plant bags, which is $37.98. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to auto insert that cell reference. And then I want to use the addition sign because we're going to add these totals together. And then the next one is the total for the chord in F5. So I'm going to click that. And then I want to close the parenthesis. And then I want to take that total and multiply that by the tax rate. And the tax rate is right here, 0.055. We can't use this because it has text in it and it's not in the proper format for calculating percentages. So we have it right here, 0.055. So the next thing I want to do is hit the asterisk because we're going to multiply the total, our total of our items. We're going to multiply that by the tax rate. And so the tax rate is 0.055, located in C9. So I'm simply going to click C9. And then I'm going to hit enter. And you can see here that my tax is 2.1219. Now if I wanted to round that down to the nearest cent, or round it up to the nearest cent, then I would come up here to the number group in my ribbon and use these decimal functions. I want to decrease the number of decimals, so I'm going to come to this one on the far right, click once, click twice, and that gives me $2.12 for the tax. So then what I want to do is factor in the total for the cost of 2 tomato planter bags, 5 cords, and the tax for all of that. So we're going to put the total right here, and it's a simple formula. We're going to go equal F4 plus F5 plus F6. Enter. So the total I'm going to pay is $40.70. And that's how we do an order of operations. That's how we factor the tax in. So we're going to take what we learned from there and apply it to the next sequence. Absolute cell reference. So with absolute cell reference, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and open up a new file. I'm going to open, browse. I'm going to come here to 06 absolute cell reference. And we have a larger invoice from Blooming Bell's Nursery, which is the same company that we used previously. And we want to be able to factor the tax in, and we want to be able to factor the total price in for all of these items. So with the allium rosium, they are $5.95 a piece, and I'm buying 5 of them. And then I need to factor in the sales tax for those 5 and the total price for that. The allium gladiators are $11.25, and I'm buying 6 of those, so on and so forth. So the first thing we want to do is factor in the sales tax. So we're going to come here into E4, and this is where we're going to put our formula. I'm going to come up here in the formula bar. I'm going to tell Excel this is a math problem by putting the equal sign first. And then I would like to do this with a parenthesis. And I'm going to click D4. And I'm going to multiply D4 by F4. I'm going to close the parenthesis. Then I'm going to multiply that by I4. And I get $1.64. Now with the cell reference function, what I should be able to do is highlight the $1.64, E4, and when it's active with this little green square around it, I should be able to come to the bottom corner until my cursor turns into a black cross. And I should be able to drag this down, and you would think that all of the tax should autofill itself because it's referencing one step down, one step down, one step down. But I get a bunch of zeros. Why did I get a bunch of zeros? Well, this is why. When I did the math here, you can see that I referenced D4, and I referenced F4, and I referenced I4. And so all of the numbers were on row number 4 that I was factoring the math in. But when I drug this down, the relative cell reference moved everything down to the next row. So when I began to factor in D5 and F5, it moved this one down as well to I5. And what happens when you take a number and multiply it by 0? You get 0. And then when a reference moved down to here, to D6, F6, I6. So you can see all of these zeros. But there's a function called the absolute cell reference that allows me to modify the formula so that I can say everything that happens with the I category only reference I4. Even if I drag this down to row 13, row 14, row 15, always come back and reference I4. And the way we do that is by inserting the simple $sign in the reference. So I'm going to come back here to the sales tax right here. This is E4. We're going to come up to the formula up here. Now I need a $sign for every part of the reference. So I need it to always say column I, and I need it to always reference row 4. So since I is one part of the reference and 4 is another part of the reference, I need to lock both parts in with the $sign. How do I do that? I come up here to the formula. If you look at the formula bar here, and just to the left of the letter I, I'm going to put in a $sign. And then I'm going to move the cursor between the I and the 4 and put in another $sign. So my formula now looks like this. Equal, parenthesis, D4 times F4, close parenthesis, multiplied by $I, $4. Now when I hit enter, we'll see the answer here is still $1.64. So the answer here doesn't really look like much has changed. But since I'm always referencing I4, now I can drag this down and it will advance to D5, D6, D7, D8. It will also advance F, F5, F6, F7, F8, so on and so forth. But it will not advance column I. It will always stay I4. So let me drag it down now and see what the difference is. That looks about right. And now all we have to do is total our price here is to take our mouse, click in G4, come up here, press equal. We want to do a parenthesis again because we need to multiply the 595, which is located in D4, by the quantity of 5, which is in F4. Then we want to close that parenthesis, and then we want to add the tax, which is E4. So our formula looks like this. Equal, parenthesis, D4 times F4, close parenthesis, plus E4. And when I hit enter, my total is $31.39. We're going to try that again just to get a little practice in. So I'm going to move here to G5. And I'm going to start with the equal sign. And then I need to open up the parenthesis. I need to come over here to D5. Click on that. We're going to multiply that by the quantity, which is F5. We're going to close that parenthesis. We're going to hit the plus sign. Now we're going to add the 371, which is an E5. I can hit enter. And we'll do this one more time. In G6, we're going to go equal. Open the parenthesis. Go to D6. Multiply that by F6. Close the parenthesis. Add E6. And hit enter. But now that we've got that formula, instead of having to type that formula over and over and over, we can do the same drag sequence that we have been doing. So I can come over here, as long as the square is highlighted. I can come down here in the bottom corner where I get the black cross, and I drag this down. And it gives me the totals for all of my items, and then down here it adds it all up together because I had a preset formula in there that says to add together everything from G4 all the way down to G20. So my total is $874.77. And that concludes today's lesson for Excel 2016 Formulas and Functions Part 2. Now here is a summary of what we covered today. In this lesson, we went over relative cell reference, we went over creating complex formulas, we went over the order of operations, and we went over absolute cell reference. Once again, this is Instructor Williams, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the Antioch Public Library District. For more technology-related material and other Antioch Public Library content, please click the subscribe button.